Hi, I'm Will Lewis, and we're back for episode 10, season 3 of The Art of Outsmarting with Keith Mitnik. Throughout the season, we've gone through the different tools in Keith's powerful packaging toolbox so that you can make a difference for your clients and help the jury reach the right conclusions. Because as we know, we can't change the facts, but we can help the jury get to the right conclusions. For today's episode, we're going to talk about some isolated issues that arise during trial and during certain types of cases that maybe don't fit neatly in one of those previous tools that we've talked about in previous episodes.
Personal injury cases hinge on the details. ABC Legal, America's most trusted process server, simplifies every aspect of service, so you can focus on winning your clients' cases. ABC Legal-empowered process servers deliver documents nationwide and make 12 million attempts annually, with real-time GPS-tracked updates and proof available online. ABC Legal's simple and transparent services make life easy for your team and help you keep costs under control. Your clients deserve consistent, reliable, and accountable service of process. Sign up for a free account today.
Keith, welcome back. It's good to see you.
I'm glad to be here.
So I've kind of made a list today of some of the issues that arise during trial and during the types of issues we see with some regularity. And I'd like to go through some of them and get your thoughts on how to deal with them to get back to that overarching issue of the defense is trying to get the jury to reach the wrong conclusion. And we're trying to get the jury to reach the truth, the right conclusion, and how we can steer them in that direction. So I want to start with a issue that we see often, which is surveillance. I wonder if you could talk a little bit some of your techniques in dealing. I'm not talking about surveillance where they catch our client. The case wouldn't be a trial if our client was out there playing tackle football and said that he couldn't walk. But surveillance is showing the client living their life, living a normal life, and not necessarily, holding their back in agonizing pain, everything they do.
That's the classic one. It's such an unfair tactic. And if we don't address it, the wrong conclusion can easily be reached. How many times have we sat in a courtroom, lights go down, here it comes, and I had one, and we had a very significant 7-figure verdict, but my client's out there on surveillance with a pole saw. He worked in yards, had a little yard care business, sawing big palmetto branches way up in the air and working a big weed whacker in one of those blowers. And I'm talking about the big strap-on kind. And he's got a neck and back. And you're just sitting there and left to its own devices, you'd be going, sure doesn't look like you got a neck and back problem. And it is so unfair. And so to beat it, you got to get out in front of it. You do it in opening. You do it with your client on direct. You do it in voir dire, and you circle back in closing. And the beginning point, like so much this whole year we've covered, comes back to thinking about the truth of it and what's wrong with the conclusion they're trying to suggest the jury make. Why are they fundamentally wrong? What's the fatal flaw in it? And the fatal flaw in surveillance is this. They're trying the wrong case and the wrong injury. If our client had the kind of injury that would prevent them from doing physical activity, and you had them doing physical activity, it would be an aha moment, and it would be the most important piece of evidence the jury saw, and we deserve to lose. But that's not the injury. It's just absolutely not the injury. And not only is it not the injury that doesn't prevent it, it is now, by the time they get the surveillance, a chronic pain syndrome, meaning people have learned to live with it, meaning they're not being ambushed by pain. There's zero surprising about it, and it doesn't prevent them from doing it. They just pay a price for it. Sometimes they get more sore and achy then. Usually it's in the evening, they're on a heating pad, and no one's filming in the house. So if you remember the kind of injury we're dealing with and the familiarity of living with it, you punch me in the mouth, I'm going to react because it came out of the blue. I wasn't expecting it. I got sucker punched. I'm going to be rubbing it, hollering. That's what's wrong. So what do we do? How do we translate that fundamental knowledge into communicating with the jury? Well, first thing you got to cover in jury selection, surveillance. And you ask questions like, and you explain, we've all heard about cases where someone claims they can't do it and they got them aha. And that's horrible. Terrible for the concept of justice. Those people already run out of court. Now we've distinguished ourselves. However, I do have a concern sometimes when people have a surveillance. Some people just think if the defense went to the time, trouble, and expense of getting it, there must be some exaggerating going on. Must be some faking, or they wouldn't have wasted the time, money, expense, even if they didn't catch it. So how many of you say me and say, honestly, if they got surveillance, I'm already starting out thinking you're faking or exaggerating. You'd have to prove yourself out of that hole. How many of you say that? As opposed to, no, I don't start that way at all just because they got it. You're going to find people say yes, get rid of them for cause. Now, that's the beginning. Then in opening, you start laying out the truth of the matter. In closing, you bring it full circle. And here's the truth of the matter. My clients had this pain for now, by the time they were filling in 2 years. My clients never said they're not working. My client's a hard-working, buck up, don't give up kind of person. Continue to work. Regretfully, for this kind of injury, my client has a job that he does. He's got his own little business. Is hard physical work. That's how he makes his living. Hard physical work. He's good at it. If my client had a sedentary job, just sitting around, he would have less of the spikes. Remember, we talked about pilot light pain and flare-ups. He would not spend the vast majority of his time in flare-up. He'd have a lot more of pilot light. But that's not his life. He's got a physically demanding life, which means this injury is worse for him. He's living in flare-up, particularly at the end of a day, because he's having to be very active. Now, the fact that he is continuing to do his work means he's got grit. They're suggesting to you that anybody that has a physically demanding job or does physically demanding things has to quit with an injury like this. Quit. Well, the America I live in is full of people with grit that don't quit. And if my client suddenly quit doing that job, I wonder what they'd be saying then. And by the way, there's zero surprise to that ache in his back and neck. None. He's doing that job. They could have filmed him every day since about 2 weeks after the crash. It'd have been the same thing. You think he goes out there and is doing this and getting sore as the day's going on, that he suddenly goes, what the heck is that all about? That's his life. So he's not walking around going, he's not grimacing, and he's not whining and complaining. If he was, given he lives with it all the time, that would be suspicious. If they had film of him going, I'd say, what's going on here? So what did they do? I want to thank them. They proved that my client is a hardworking guy that's making the most of it, and he's not just giving up, nor is he putting on a show. He's just taking care of business of life. It just means he's living in flare-ups because of what happened to him that day on the road. You feel the difference?
Oh, yeah. And I've seen you do this in practice, and this is another one of the pre-act versus react aspects of the toolbox, is getting ahead of this as you talk about, talking about surveillance, injury selection, even when, maybe I think in many of the cases, the surveillance doesn't show a whole lot, but getting the jury thinking about it the right way. And then the other thing that I've seen you talk about is what the surveillance doesn't show.
Yeah.
Doesn't show treatment, doesn't show the stretching they have to do every day, doesn't show them at night, all achy, doesn't show them in the morning getting out of bed when they barely stand up, and doesn't show the medication they're on. I remember in the case we had with the soccer player who was unquestionably a superstar, a junior college All-American, I believe, or honorable mention, but pre-crash, and after the crash was a bench player. They had surveillance after the crash. And she looked, to me or you, my soccer career ended in high school. She looks like a really good player. But to her, it was a big drop off. And I remember the defense was trying to say, well, look, she's doing the same thing these other people were doing who weren't in this terrible crash. And your question was what? Well, you don't know how many of those people are on serious pharmaceutical pain medication to even play, right? How many of those are 20-year-olds? You have to go through all that.
Judge, just so we have a record, a transcript, this is the first game, the first thing is September 24th, 2019, just so we can have a record of it.
Thank you.
I want to start with where we ended with the surveillance and the dancing. And here's why. We heard about brevity, and I'm all for brevity. There's no question it'd been unfair to expect them to play 3 hours. I wouldn't have wanted them to. I might have squat. So I'm not criticizing for cutting it down. But there's another piece to brevity. There's context. I want you to look at this. She's on the bench. If you look at the times, she's over on the bench. It's like an hour and a half later, hour later, where she gets in the game. You don't see this when you see a clip of her in the game running around, throwing the ball, chasing the ball, defending the ball, whatever soccer players do. What you don't see is a star freshman the year before who was on a full scholarship with very limited scholarships. Second team all-conference as a baby freshman. Starter, designated team leader, who's now an hour into the game sitting on the bench before she gets into the game. An hour riding the tide. To the point, her mother, who drove all the way up here not to miss a game, home or away, to watch her daughter as a star, a rising star, she was embarrassed and didn't want her mom coming anymore. And her mom wouldn't come. She didn't want her mom seeing her sitting on the bench. That's what's not shown in this video. I'll give you one more quick example before we leave it. I was trying a case not long ago. Actually, it's the same one with the saw, now that I think about it. And the defense brought in an expert. And he used to do some work with a professional sport team, basketball. And he said, with the Magic, Orlando Magic. And he said, so I heard that, and I thought it was impressive, and then I punished him with it. Because on cross-examination, I said, now, you were actually on the sideline with those athletes sometimes, weren't you? Yeah. And I said, and you would deal with their injuries? Oh, yeah. And I said, you must be a pretty good doctor because this guy's got lots of injuries, don't they? Oh, yeah. And not just the ones on injured reserve. By mid-season, most of those guys have got all kind of stuff hurting bad. Oh, yeah. I said, I don't know, but I used to go to the games. I don't go anymore, but I didn't notice any of those players that you knew were in miserable pain, running up and down the court going, ah, the whole time and holding their back or grimacing. Now, if someone elbowed them in the nose, they would, but up and down with that, no. I said, so they all faking it? You said you don't need my treatment? You're faking it because you're not grimacing and wailing. Of course not. I said, I'll leave the jury in out there. Again, they're going. So all they're doing is taking it totally out of context. They're trying the wrong case. They're trying a paralysis case, and we're not suing over a paralysis. Call it out. It doesn't work, and play it with your client.
Show them the truth.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I've seen this. I've seen that in practice.
How do you make them pay when they overplay? You make them pay by something like this in opening. Their case, the evidence is going to show You're going to hear their case is going to suggest that everybody that has been injured in a way that is causing them to live in pain. Not that they can't do things, but by doing it, it causes their pain to flare. Every one of those people need to quit. Because if they were really living in pain, they wouldn't be doing a physical job. That's what they suggest. Now, half your jurors are going to be going, that's bullshit, right there. Half of them are in pain or got a family member in pain who's still working. And then layered on. And you're also going to hear, and you know from your common sense, Americans buck up. We don't give up. Boom. Now they're really looking bad for it. Remember, they haven't even done it yet. They're going to walk into this. Then you say, here's what else you're going to hear. Pain becomes familiar. This isn't like, boom, I hit my thumb with a hammer. You didn't expect it. It's like a shock wave. It's overwhelming. You're cursing and raising things. This person for the last year and a half has been waking up with that same pain. And it's not that overwhelming, intense, unbearable pain. It's the chronic discomfort that grows if it's with overuse. With physical activity, gets worse. Doesn't interfere so much with the doing as the experience of doing. But because my client's familiar with this, and there's zero surprise about it, they're not being ambushed by pain, they deal with it every day. Would anyone expect them to be going, ow! Or, oh. They're going to be yelling. They're going to be putting on a big show, grimacing. Let me flip it. What would they, and this may draw an objection, don't give a damn. What would they say if he was grimacing, yelping, and limping around, or quit? Here's what the evidence is going to show, folks. We tell you my client has a physical job, and that's why this injury has been worse for him than someone who had a sedentary job, because physical activity, common sense, and the doctors are going to tell you, inflame it. And that's his job, and he's not a quitter. Neither of them are. They bucked up. They didn't give up. And they're continuing to support their families and work. But they're not doing a sedentary desk job. They're doing hard physical labor. So it means every day they go to work, this is what they know's coming. I'm starting in pain, I'm ending in worse pain, and I'm going to be on a heating pad when I get home. So it's worse to them. And those are the facts. And you don't have to take our word for it. The defense actually did us a favor. They videotaped them secretly. My client didn't know they were being watched, so no one can claim them working hard's putting on. They got up every day, they're going to be clips, and are working their behinds off, just like we told you. They have proven that really is the life they're living in with this injury. Now, they may try to suggest to you, because they're not putting on a show, that means they're not hurt. Ask yourself, under these circumstances with something they live with every day, if they were putting on a show of big pain, what would you think about that and what would they say about it? You'd think, I bet they knew they were being filmed. They didn't. Now, take that away. Take it away. Just let them get up and talk. Or get up and make excuses about it. Well, I know it looks like that, but let me tell you. As soon as you say but, the jury goes bullshit. This is not about your case. It's about their case. See the difference? They're going too far, and you have a golden opportunity to show them they're BSing you, ladies and gentlemen. And you get to go first. So now when they get up and do it, it will look like BS.
You know, another issue that arises is order of witnesses. I think, we all sit down in our trial meetings and we're putting together order of proof and we're thinking, who goes where. And one of the, kind of historical tropes is, well, you don't put your client on first for whatever reason. Again, every case is different, but what are your thoughts on where your client fits into presenting.
I'm glad you
case.
asked, because I got a new thought on that. I've spent the lawyers that trained me are fantastic. Would have said, you don't put your client on first. You better prove your case before they go through the gauntlet across. They're not professional witnesses. God knows what they're going to end up saying. You can't put them on first. And so I've spent a whole career and wouldn't dream of putting my client on first. Unless it was a liability, who ran the red light, and then you had to, and then you'd hopefully save the damages part for later. But typically, no. Now, I don't in every case, if they got just too much baggage, it's probably not worth it. But I've done it a total about face. And I'll tell you, I was sitting in court, listening to their opening statement. I had done the opening. I had preempted the hell out of them. They still score some points. And the overall flavors, I held them at bay, and we came out of opening, I'm convinced, winning, and I'm sure we were, because we got a great verdict. But I still came away from it going, they do such a good job, no matter how much you plug it up. There's an overall sense of your client may be exaggerating or faking and not really that hurt, and the records don't all add up and all that stuff. And I sat there and thought, after the trial, we got a good result. And I do something called after action reports. After every trial, I try to make some notes to myself, win or lose. And I lose, I really do them, because it's the only way I can heal is to start thinking, what can I do better next time? Not necessarily you screwed up, but there's a better way to do it maybe. You advance it further. And even when I win, I try to do it. Because anytime you're in the heat of the battle, you come out with fresh thoughts. And so I try to get them down for the next case. And I came out of that and I thought, what could I do? What would the best way to be able to put down what they were doing? And I thought of the unthinkable. What if I put my client on first? They are suggesting or outright saying they're exaggerating or faking, or had it before, or something else caused it. There are a million ways to approach it. I thought, what if I put my client on first? And the jury, after hearing him, goes, I don't think you're making it up. What would that do to the defense? And I realized, well, what happens right before my client, the first witness? Their opening. And if they went all in on suggesting your client's faking or exaggerating, not really hurt, and the client convinced the jury they were hurt, what would that do to the defense's credibility for the rest of the trial? What would it do to their cross-examination of the treating doctors? This is all subjective. You're basing it on what they told you. The subjective objective is just saying you just got to take their word for it. And they're in a lawsuit, so why would you ever take their word for it? That's the whole cross. How far would they get with that cross of the treater when they say, so that's all subjective? And you get up and say, when he says subjective, means you believe when she told you that, you thought she was hurt. Yeah. And the jury goes, well, so do I. What would it do to their cross? Now, let's flip it. What if I put the treater on first to go ahead and establish it? Now they do the cross. Well, this record doesn't add up with that. She didn't tell you about this earlier injury, and that's all subjective. And even the MRI that you're relying on so heavily, you said it requires clinical correlation. Doesn't clinical correlation just mean at the end of the day, you got to believe what she's telling you about the sequence of events? Yeah. Well, what does that mean to a jury? It means when your treating doctor, who you put so much weight on, you had to have him first, when they were all said and done, their testimony came with an asterisk. I understand they say this is from the crash and it's permanent, but I really can't decide whether I accept that or not until I decide whether what his patient was telling him is reliable. He believed it. That doesn't mean I'm going to believe it. So you've wasted the opportunity to really kill him with your treating doctor because it came with an asterisk. And so by the time your client testifies, that testimony is 2 days earlier, 3. So the asterisk, they half forget what he said or she said. Put your client on first, put him up next, and now it's golden. So I got thinking, why am I waiting to the end to put my client on? All I'm doing is watering down the treater's testimony and letting them get away with all this. You didn't see this record. She didn't tell you about that. And everybody's like, that's kind of troubling. Let them do it to your client. Your client says, that was 8 years ago, and in my mind had nothing to do with this. And they go, yeah, that sounded credible to me. So I always ask lawyers now when I'm coming in to try a case with them. I have 2 questions, and I do not want you to answer the second one before you answer the first one. On a scale of 1 to 10, how believable is your client? And the second question, do not answer, don't skip it in front, is how likable is your client? Scale of 1 to 10. And if I hear 6, 7 on believable or higher, and 3 on likable, I put them up. Because
Believable is more important to you than likable.
believable is more important on this theory. And now if they give me a high on likable, now we're really strong. I'm going to ask, can we put them on before opening? But it's the believability, because you destroy the credibility of the defense. You bolster the credibility of your treaters. In the case, you've won opening, they made some headway, and you just crushed them.
And, and not in every case, obviously, but it does seem, and more often than not, defense lawyers want to defend on the evidence, on the medicine.
Yeah.
On the medicine. And they want to say, well, that this doesn't match up with the injury and the symptoms or whatever else. But that's an uphill battle if the client is believable. Versus you're kind of handing them. I think the defense lawyers would rather cross-examine those doctors many times than cross-examine the client.
Unless, look, if your client said, I have never had a neck problem before, never been treated by a doctor for it, never had an MRI. And 2 months earlier, they're in a car crash, went to the emergency room, had MRIs, and went to a chiropractor right up to the date of your crash. That's a different case. You know what you do with that? I got a strategy for that case. Get another case.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about your typical case.
Yep.
Now, look, there are clients that have screwed up their depots, and there's just so much, and you think they really come off unbelievable, and you're probably losing anyhow. And I probably want to try and cover that.
And the clients that just, because of their personality, just don't make good witnesses. They're not able to articulate the truth and the core of what their case is. So
save them from themselves and bury them. So I'm not saying call every client first, but I'm saying the vast majority, and I'm putting them up when people tell me they're not that likable. I say, I don't care. I do care, but I don't care for this decision. It's about credibility, because I'm going to destroy the defense, and we can deal with in closing argument and opening and voir dire. This isn't a popularity contest. Does anyone think that if someone's hurt and they won the captain of the cheerleaders and the captain of the football team and the president of their student body and everybody loved them, that their injury is worth any more than somebody who was an outcast, wasn't very popular? Anybody think that? People go, no. Half you jurors were outcasts, by the way. So you can deal with that. You can't, you're probably dead if they're not believable anyhow. And that's one more factor. So I've had a lawyer say on the phone in one of my click and pick with Mitniks I do every week. I say, yeah, but my client's not real bright. Believable, but not real bright, and gonna make some gives dumb answers. Gonna make some mistakes. And I'm afraid it could melt down on cross. I just don't trust them to hang on a cross, even though they're believable. I said, okay, do you think if you put them on as your last witness, you're not going to worry about it? No. I said, so you think they're going to destroy your case on cross, maybe? Yeah. I said, you think it's not going to destroy it if you're your last witness? It may be worse. Get it over with early.
Yeah.
Maybe you can recover. They believed her, but thought she was a dummy. You can win that case. I'd rather do it up front. So if they got extraordinary baggage, I don't want to start there. But every other case where they got decent believability, not great, good, put them up.
Okay, now, and one more question kind of about order of witnesses and use of witnesses.
No, wait, I'll just add one more thing. Now, things don't go according to plan, and suddenly you're doing the first witness not when you were thinking, and the only time you can get your surgeons then.
Sure, yeah.
That changes everything.
Understood. How about before and after witnesses?
Oh, God. Let me tell you about before and after. two caveats. They are supposed to be assets, not liabilities. There are two ways to screw up a before and after witness. One is don't ask them about some liability type issues that they may go probing about and forget that they may have talked about the crash to them. This is one of those hard knocks. I'm trying a case that's probably been 20 years ago. I came in to help someone in the case. Before and after witness. It was great, by the way. Fantastic. Looked good, talked good, said all kind of great stuff. The dispute was, there was a liability dispute. And the defense position was that she was going to be late to work. They had some clock in or something that was showing she was running late. And therefore, she was speeding. And our lady said, I wasn't running late. My boss could care less. I get there 10 minutes after the supposed start time most days. They don't care. I stay late. And I was not speeding. And that was a huge dispute in the case. Before and after witness. Did beautiful. Here comes cross. Did you ever talk to her about what happened that day? Oh, yeah. She called me right after it. What did she tell me? She goes, I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. I was already running late. No one bothered to ask her. So make sure there's nothing they could end up throwing in that would hurt you before you put them up. Second, that's an extreme, but it's covering. I've never forgotten that one. But here's what I really don't like. I've been in cases where a lawyer, and I'm not involved with the before and afters. I'm doing other stuff, so I haven't paid attention. I assume they're going to do good. They get up, they want to tell the story about, well, we went on this camping trip, and it's a family thing. We do it every year. And after one night in the tent, he left, and the rest of the family stayed for the next 3 days. It was a 3-day weekend. He drove home. We had an extra car. He went home. I thought that was a pretty good story. Next witness, before and after. Tell me about the camping trip. I'm like, what the hell are we doing the camping trip again? If you're going to have 2, 3, have them talk about different things. If you talk about the same number, one of the jurors at your very best is bored, doesn't want to hear it again. And worse, they think, is this the only story they got? So make sure they cover different things. Make sure there's no baggage that's going to hurt you, and have them cover different topics.
Yeah, I feel the same way even about the plaintiff's testimony as well. When I feel like sometimes there's certain moments that stick out when the injury impacted them. Maybe it was going to the beach with their kids or going on a particular trip. But you don't want to hit that trip and that issue over and over, because the reality is these injuries affect all aspects of life, from sleeping to, getting ready in the morning to go to work. And when I feel like when the plaintiff can't articulate that, it impacts their, the ability to show the jury the true value of the injury and what was really taken, if they're only talking about one or two things, over and over.
You're right.
Here's another issue that arises, in cases is we all, and here's the thing, we as lawyers and dealing with clients, we know the truth on this, but the defense makes an issue of it because they know they can, because they know lay jurors are not going to appreciate that you can be in a car crash and not feel significant symptoms the day of or the moment of, and then have those symptoms develop for, days or even a week later.
Classic.
Yeah. So, and then you're in here, you're saying you're permanently injured, but you didn't go to the ER right from the car crash.
Yep.
How do you deal with that?
Again, once you give the jury the proper perspective, they cannot win the battle over the right conclusion. This is the right conclusion. This is the wrong. What's the fixed fact? The fixed fact is you didn't go to the emergency room. You didn't even see a doctor for 2 weeks. Right conclusion? Wasn't the kind of injury required him to go right away.
Hope they would go away.
Hope it would go away. And wrong conclusion. You couldn't have been hurt. So how do you teach the jury? That's wrong. Because you got this wonderful opportunity of getting to go first. You got to explain to the jury. You're going to hear. This is not the kind of injury that required emergency care. It was not life and death treatment. If my client had had a broken leg and a bone sticking out and blood spurting all over. And that was the injury. And they didn't go to the ER and didn't see a doctor for 2 weeks. And we were coming in here telling you it happened in the crash. I wouldn't be here because that'd be nonsense. I said, but that's not this injury. This wasn't life and death. They weren't bleeding to death. They weren't having a heart attack. They didn't have bones sticking out. They were hit and their car was drivable. And you know what she's going to testify? You know what she felt? Stiff and sore, rattled, shook up, but she thought she was okay. In fact, she told the defendant who asked, how are you? She said, I think I'm fine. Should we call an ambulance? No. She thought she was fine. Because herniations start out, you're going to hear from the doctors, just like a sprained strain. But over time, when they don't go away like they should have, then you start getting MRIs and workup. And you go, oh my gosh, it's worse than that. But they feel the same to start with. So here's the reality. It was not a medical emergency. Going to the hospital was optional. And she had her kids to pick up. And her car was drivable. And I suggest to you, if she'd have run to them and said, give me an ambulance. I want the siren. Put the sirens on too. I want on a get me a gurney. Now that would be suspicious. But those aren't the facts of this case. They're trying the wrong case and the wrong facts if that's what they're talking about. Because guess what? My client knows, like most people do. If you go to the emergency room, it's hours. It's expensive. And guess who's there? A bunch of sick people. God knows what you're going to come away with. And she got responsibilities, and all she's doing is stiff and sore. And she thought it was going to go away. So why didn't she call the doctor the next day? Because she thought it was going to go away, but not the next day. So when she gets out about a week and it hadn't gone away, her husband said, honey, you ought to be feeling better. You need to call the doctor. Let's give it a couple more days. A couple more days went by. It didn't go away. Husband said, you need to call the doctor. She did. You know what she didn't do? She didn't call the doctor's office, her primary care doctor, to go in and see him. And when the recording came on and said, if this is an emergency, hang up and call 911, she said, I can't call 911. It wasn't an emergency. She got the receptionist and they said, well, you can come in Friday at 3 o'clock. I can't come at 3. I picked the kids up. Well, then the following week, we got a Tuesday. You could come in at 10 in the morning. I'll take it. That's why she didn't go till then. And I suggest to you, if she'd have raced in earlier, some people might do that to try and create a lawsuit. She wasn't trying to create a lawsuit. She thought this was going to be long gone. So folks, now you know what the evidence is. So she didn't go to the doctor right away, and she didn't go to the emergency room. And had she, that would have been suspicious. But MRIs don't lie. Let's look at the MRI. There it is. Not only is it there, not only can you see the herniation with your own eyes, there's increased signal, which shows swelling, which shows high probability. That's trauma. And it was the natural progression of a herniation injury, not broken bones, blood spurting, heart attack. And the mom didn't run her to an emergency room. She just been in an emergency room and went home with the same hope everyone else had. She's sore as can be. She's hurting her neck and back, but the hope was she's going to heal up. She's just been in the ER. So the suggestion is you didn't run back. You must not be hurt. Not with this kind of injury. They're defending a different kind of injury. If she had a bone sticking out, spurting blood, and you said you didn't go to the emergency room, that must have happened later. It must not have happened now. That'd make sense. Wrong case, wrong facts, wrong argument.
The kind of along the same lines. Well, your client's not really hurt because they didn't go to the ER from the crash. Your client's not really hurt because there's a period of time where they didn't treat.
Yeah, gap in treatment, we hear it. Well, let's talk about that. Again, all I'm doing is taking fundamental truths and giving the jury the context So they have the proper perspective, so they reach the right conclusion, not the wrong. Because if you sit silent and let them get away with it, people, well, they didn't go to a doctor for a year. I had someone tell me, yeah, I got a pretty bad gap in treatment. One of our lawyers. I said, how long? They said, 5 months. I said, what the hell? That ain't even a gap.
It takes 5 months to get an appointment sometimes
that ain't a gap.
with the right specialist.
But, a year, no treatment. There's an easy answer to that. And it's just the truth. When do you go to the doctor over and over and over? What happens? You're spending a half a day. Time you drive there, sit, wait, get in, get out, get back. It's a half a day. Who's got a half a day to go? Somebody who is highly motivated. What motivates people to go? Well, one thing might, for some people, just trying to make it look like they're hurt in a lawsuit when they're not. But for people that are legitimately hurt, why do they go? Hope for a cure. She was going hoping to get a cure. She didn't want to live the rest of her life with this. When she found the bad news, there's no cure, it's permanent. What'd she do? All we can do for you is give you some temporary relief, but you're going to spend a half a day every time. She got on with the business of life because it's not intolerable. She can live life with it. She's living it right now. So she didn't go back to the doctor because that's not who she is. She's not just going to go for appearance's sake. She went to a doctor to get a cure. It wasn't a cure. So why did she go back a month before trial? Because we got an obligation to bring you the best evidence. And her doctor, who's going to be a witness for you, we're bringing him here. We're not going to bring somebody in here with old evidence. He needed to re-examine her, take an updated history, and redo the test and get a new MRI so he'd give you the most current information. So of course she went back. Now, does it mean, yes, we got a life care plan? Does it mean she's never going to go back? Why are we presenting a life care plan? She hadn't been, and there's no cure. I'll tell you why. Because the doctor's going to tell you over time, it's only going to get worse as the natural aging process overlays on top of the damaged links in their spine. It's going to get worse and worse, and she's going to reach a point where that black hole of time to go, getting some relief is not going to be as easy to just say, I'm just going to, I can live with it. She's going to go because she's going to start needing more relief because it's going to get worse and worse and more interfering in life. That's why we're bringing you a life care plan with these, because you know what happens if we don't bring you that evidence? You're not allowed to even consider it. We take your choices away from you and my client's future choices away from her. So yeah, we're bringing those to you like a menu item because her doctor says, I know she's not doing it now, but I believe she's going to need it. I think she needs it right now, but there's going to come a time where, as resistant as she is, she's going to be going. And so we're presenting it to you so you have the options to decide what we're going to do down the line. That's why we're bringing you that evidence.
Gap in treatment. How do they go too far with a gap in treatment? They say you haven't been to the doctor, and I know I've talked about this before, but never in this context. And I want to put it in this context because it's a perfect example. If they got up and said they haven't been going to the doctor for 2 years or a year and a half or whatever it is, that doesn't mean their pain's all gone. It just suggests it can't be that bad. And the amount of money they're talking about, you'd expect it to be bad enough they'd go to the doctor a little more often, wouldn't you? Not that it means they're not hurt, but it's an important factor for you to weigh. What the hell would I come up with to deal with that? I'd do the same thing, but it wouldn't work as good. But they don't. They go, and let me tell you what, Mr. Jones has this giant gap in treatment. Let me show you. And they bring a big calendar out and they make, every month cover the courtroom. Look at this. 2 years. It's a gap. I don't care. Let's say a year. That's classic. I've had over 2. Here's how they go too far. The implication is all better. You healed up and the little boo-boos all better. Boo-boo better. And what's the fundamental core of that? Going too far. Running out of position. Not having discipline. Because I don't want a disciplined defense who stays put. I want an over-aggressive one that runs their ass out of the play over and over and over, because I'm looking for it. I game plan for it in advance like a good coach would, and I'm watching like a good quarterback would for openings I didn't know they were going to give me in the middle of trial, and I'll audible to it or make adjustments at halftime. I am acutely aware of they're going to give me these wonderful opportunities by going too far, because they're extremists who are over-aggressive. And everything has to be to suggest we're frauds, not hurt, or had a problem before, or had a little problem and healed up. And this crash couldn't have caused it. So what's the gap say? How do they overplay it? The gap is fundamentally, they won't say it, but it's the only way they can make their point. No doctor equals no pain.
The gap in treatment issue, I always find it interesting, because they always, the defense wants to make a big deal out of it. But at the same time, like you're saying, it's the truth. It's just another example of, we've talked about this entire season. The facts are what they are. It's the conclusions from those facts that matter. And they're showing one conclusion that, as we know, just isn't the truth. And why it's so important that us representing the plaintiff, there to protect the plaintiff, gets ahead of it and shows what the true conclusions are, and getting the jury going in the right direction. Because nothing's more frustrating when what the defense is saying is nonsense, but they got there before you did.
Yep. You can't let them get there first. And I'll give you one last piece, and then we'll wrap this up. Here is another fundamental truth you can give a jury that puts an end to this gap in treatment nonsense. What is the base foundation of the gap in treatment argument? No doctor equals no pain. If you're not going, you're not in pain. Well, if that's the case, all the pain management doctors in America are about to get out of business when the word gets out, because everybody's going to quit going, and they're going to be, hallelujah, they're going to be cured. Kind of like the guy woke up with a crick in his neck. Just quit going to the doctor, because your pain's going to disappear. It doesn't work that way. No doctor does not equal no pain. In what they're suggesting, if you are in pain, you be going. But with this particular kind of pain, what would be suggested if she was camped out at the doctor's office? Now you see why we need you.
It's great. It's great. Well, Keith, this has been a hell of a season. I want to personally thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Hopefully that I know I will put a lot of what we've talked about into practice. Hopefully the rest of the audience will as well. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the season.
Hey, this has been great. I've loved doing it with you. And I tell you what, I'm going to love more, our next trial.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait. I can't wait. Thanks a lot, Keith.
Thank you.
Well, that was the final episode of the season. I hope everybody enjoyed it. In episode 10, we got to go through and see some other techniques that Keith uses to help the jury reach the right conclusions from the facts. We talked about gaps in treatment, not going when a client does not go directly to the ER from the scene, dealing with surveillance, and some other defense techniques. As I look back on the season, one thing that I really enjoyed and I really tried to focus on were practical tips that all of us can apply to our cases. So I really hope that the audience was able to learn stuff along the way, get some new ideas to help our clients, and I hope I hope everyone enjoyed the season as much as I did. So we'll see everyone in season 4.